The concept of the invisible language of intimacy starts with a fundamental misunderstanding of how human connection works. When most men encounter a woman who is reaching out for engagement, they tend to label that behavior as needy or high maintenance. This is a defensive misinterpretation that misses the psychological reality. What looks like a demand for attention is actually a search for security. When a woman has gone through a long period without genuine intimacy, which is the deep, quiet experience of being truly understood and seen for who she is, her internal communication system undergoes a shift. She doesn't stop trying to connect. Instead, she begins to communicate through a more subtle, precise code. On the surface, her actions might seem small or even indirect, but underneath, they are loud calls to see if a man is actually paying attention to her emotional state. To navigate this, you have to look through the lens of behavioral psychology and attachment science. When someone has been running on empty emotionally, their nervous system becomes hypervigilant. They aren't looking for grand romantic gestures or scripted lines. They are scanning for a secure base. If you lack the awareness to listen beneath the surface of her words, you will likely react to her behavior as if it is a personal inconvenience or a game being played against you. However, real understanding involves decoding these moments as a form of vulnerable communication. She may not feel safe enough yet to state her needs plainly, so she uses these quiet signals to test the waters. The men who recognize this shift don't just win the interaction, they provide a rare sense of safety that allows her to drop her guard. By responding to the intent behind the behavior rather than just the behavior itself, you transition from being a spectator to a trusted partner who truly understands the language she is speaking. When a woman who has been emotionally or physically starved of intimacy begins to act differently, most men fall into one of two traps because they are reacting to the behavior itself rather than the need driving it. The first mistake is overcorrection, where a man misinterprets a small opening as a permanent green light to accelerate. He sees a sign of interest and immediately floods the connection with intensity, texting more, pursuing harder, and trying to force a level of closeness that hasn't been earned yet. While he thinks he is being attentive, he is actually smothering the very sense of safety she was trying to build. By moving into her emotional space before he was truly invited, he creates pressure that forces her to pull back. He ends up confused, replaying his words to find a mistake, but the error wasn't in what he said. It was in his inability to match her pace. The second mistake is the exact opposite, misreading her reach for connection as desperation or games. In this scenario, a man notices her subtle moves. Perhaps she's leaning in or testing the waters, and he pulls back to protect his own ego or to avoid looking too eager. He might think he's being alpha or staying in control, but from her perspective, her careful attempt to see if he is emotionally safe is met with a cold wall of distance. She interprets his withdrawal as genuine disinterest, assumes the connection is a dead end, and quietly closes the door. Both of these failures stem from a single root error, reading the surface punctuation of an interaction while completely missing the sentence being spoken. A woman in this state isn't looking for a polished performance or a perfect line. She is scanning for presence. She is asking a silent, fundamental question. Are you steady enough to handle the weight of who I am without flinching? If you are constantly over-pursuing or under-responding, you prove that you aren't actually present. You're just reacting to your own insecurities or assumptions. The attunement test is the first hurdle most men face, and they often fail it without even realizing the test began. To understand this, you have to realize she isn't looking for a compliment or a good job to boost her ego. She is testing for attunement. In psychology, attunement is the ability to truly tune in to another person's internal frequency, to hear the emotion behind the words and respond in a way that shows you actually get it. It's the difference between hearing a noise and understanding a melody. When a woman has been emotionally isolated, she doesn't just open the front door to her life, she cracks it open an inch to see if you'll notice the light coming through. This test usually happens through layered communication. She might drop a self-deprecating joke with a hidden edge of truth, or share a brief light story about a difficult past experience. She isn't doing this to be dramatic or manipulative. Her subconscious is simply checking, is this man capable of hearing what I am not saying? Most men make the mistake of staying on the surface. They laugh at the joke because it was funny, or they acknowledge the story literally and move on to the next topic. They are there physically, but they aren't perceptive. To her, this is data. It tells her that while you might be a nice guy, you aren't the one who can handle the deeper layers of her reality. The man who passes this test is the one who chooses to linger in the subtext. He doesn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he notices the shift in her tone or the look in her eyes and asks a question that goes one level deeper, such as, "When you said that just now, what did you actually mean?" Or, "That sounded like it was actually a pretty big deal to you, is it?" For a woman who has spent years perfecting her emotional walls, she is essentially handing you a key to see if you recognize what it's for. If you handle that small, vulnerable piece of information with curiosity and care, she feels a rare sense of safety, and the next layer of her world opens up to you. If you miss it, she simply assumes it wasn't meant to be, and the wall quietly slides back into place. The proximity pattern is a shift that happens physically before it is ever spoken about. When a woman has been emotionally or physically isolated for a long time, her body begins to vibe check a potential partner by managing distance. This isn't a calculated move or a game. It is a biological response rooted in how we handle our personal space. We all carry an invisible personal space bubble that acts as a protective radius. When attraction starts to build, that bubble naturally begins to shrink. She might find reasons to stand slightly closer than necessary, let her arm brush against yours while walking, or lean in across your space to look at something. These small, seemingly accidental moments are her nervous system testing the waters to see how it feels to have you in her inner circle. The most common mistake men make here is treating this proximity as a direct command to escalate. Because they notice she is closer, they assume they must immediately close the remaining gap, moving in for a kiss too early or matching her subtle touch with an intense, forward physical energy. This reaction often backfires because it kills the tension that was just starting to bloom. In the world of attraction, desire lives in the space between two people, not in the immediate collapse of that space. When you lunge for the invitation she just tentatively offered, you shift the dynamic from a mutual pull to a one-sided pressure. Instead of feeling drawn to you, she starts to feel hunted or rushed, which triggers her defensive systems to reactivate and push you back out. What she is actually looking for in this phase is warmth without urgency. She wants to feel that you are fully aware of her, that you aren't oblivious to her being near, but she also needs to know that you aren't going to pressure her just because she moved closer. This creates a very rare and powerful combination in her nervous system: safety mixed with electricity. You become irresistible when you can acknowledge her presence with a smile, a steady gaze, or a relaxed posture without immediately trying to take more. By staying rooted in yourself and not rushing the process, you allow the space between you to become charged with potential. You are essentially showing her that you can handle her proximity with calm confidence, which proves you are a secure choice for the intimacy she's been missing. The emotional risk signal is the most critical turning point in a connection because it represents the moment she stops testing your awareness and starts testing your character. When a woman has been emotionally isolated, she eventually reaches a point where she offers you a piece of her real self, a vulnerable story, a specific fear, or a quiet admission of a struggle she usually keeps hidden. This rarely comes with a warning. It's often a slip of the tongue or a heavy truth dropped into a casual moment, followed immediately by her trying to minimize it with a phrase like, "I don't know why I just told you that." In that exact second, her subconscious is asking the most important question of all: are you strong enough to carry the parts of me that aren't easy or fun? The irony is that most men fail this test precisely because they are trying to be helpful. Their first instinct is to switch into problem solver mode. They offer logical advice, try to reframe her pain to make it seem smaller, or tell her she's too good to feel that way. While these responses are well-intentioned, they actually act as an emotional shutdown. To her, it feels like you are rushing to fix the problem just so the heavy feeling goes away. You aren't sitting with her in the dark, you're just trying to turn the lights on because you are uncomfortable. Even worse is the mirroring mistake, where a man immediately jumps in with his own similar story to bond. While he thinks he's being relatable, he's actually hijacked her moment of vulnerability and made the conversation about himself. Both responses signal the same thing: I am not a safe place for your weight. The response that changes everything is much simpler, yet it requires much more internal strength. You must simply hold the space. You don't offer a solution, you don't give advice, and you don't look for a fix. You let her words land, and you let the silence sit for a moment so she knows you aren't afraid of what she just said. When you do speak, you offer recognition instead of analysis. A simple phrase like, I can see why that stayed with you, or thank you for trusting me with that, I hear how much that cost you to say, is what creates a secure base. By acknowledging the weight without trying to lighten it, you prove that you are a man who actually sees her. In a world of people who only want the highlight reel, being the person who can handle the hard to carry parts makes you fundamentally different and deeply magnetic.